Welcome back. Now it's time for our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, President at Canadians for Affordable Energy. Take it away, Dan.
Well, thank you very much for that, Teresa. And yes, we're speeding very quickly to the end of August. We still have a couple of weeks left, but for mid-August, it looks like prices are going to remain comfortably stable right across North America. And that has a lot to do with the fact that there isn't really a market for raising prices at this time. Markets seem to be very passive, and energy markets in particular looking at all the wrong signals for where to get pricing. But we know that there is, of course, a crimp on supply in oil, and that's going to eventually have to be reconciled one way or another. And there's lots, of course, of belief that because there is a U.S. election, that prices will remain stable at least until after November. So that may be good news for consumers. We haven't seen much effect from any meteorological events. We did see a bit of an increase in Western Canada to the tune of 10, 12 cents a litre because of the shutdown of the Exxon refinery in Joliet near Chicago. Important for everyone to know that there are three markets that influence gas prices in Canada. The first one, which affects Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Ontario, at least most of Ontario, is known as the New York Mercantile Exchange, or the New York Harbor Price, spot price for gasoline. For Western Canada, which includes a little piece of northwestern Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and all of the BC central and interior regions, it's known as the Chicago CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or the Chicago spot price. And so that's why we saw prices go up in Western Canada last week and a half ago, because of what was happening in the U.S. Midwest. The final area, of course, is the Pacific Northwest, which is Washington State and Oregon, and that tends to have an impact on prices for Vancouver and Vancouver Island. So those are really the three areas that are affected by U.S. markets, and those are the three markets that really impinge and determine the price we're going to pay. All we know here in Canada is that the value of the dollar is important because we pay for those prices in U.S. terms. We know that there's a bit of a markup here because in Canada, we have a clean fuel standard in many provinces already, Quebec, British Columbia, Atlantic Canada, where the second carbon tax, which is what I call it, is in fact imposed and added on to the price of fuel. So that means across the country, even though markets may be stable or to the downside, the United States, for instance, gas prices are as much as 40 cents to 75 cents a gallon cheaper than they were this time last year. That we haven't seen quite the same in Canada, where prices are pretty much where they were this time last year, maybe down a penny or two a litre. But we have to consider taxation. We also have to consider the fact that we have in Canada a very weak Canadian dollar. This time last year, 132 pennies bought you a US dollar. This year's closer to $1.38. So that adds another 2 cents a litre to the price of gasoline. I'm not seeing much of a change this week. I think we're going to stay in the 180s, low 180s for Vancouver. For the BC interior, 170s. For Alberta, look for the 152 to 155 range. Ditto for Saskatchewan. Manitoba, a little lower, but not much lower at $1.50 to $1.50. And for Ontario, $1.62 to $1.65 will be the new normal. And Quebec, of course, 10 cents a litre more than that, with Atlantic Canada not showing much of a move. So it really means a stable week for the middle of August. Remember, mid-September, we switched from winter to summer to winter gasoline, and that's going to provide at least a 10 cent a litre savings. I'm looking to see that happens in the same way we saw prices go up in April. But sooner or later, markets are going to wake up, and they're going to smell the coffee, and they're going to recognize that there's a big, big problem, and that ignoring fundamentals leads to significant price corrections. And that does include geopolitical tensions. So really, Teresa, that's all we have for this week. Gasoline is pretty quiet. It's not the thing that's moving prices right now, even though they're more expensive. People are getting a false sense of economy. They're thinking things are just fine. But in fact, you have been and continue to pay a lot more than you did this time last year. And that is going to be inflationary one way or another. This time next week, look for prices to move up a little bit, maybe a little bit more meteorological effects coming from the U.S. Gulf Coast. For now, stable as she goes, no big changes for the week ahead.